The Homer.
Any questions? What is this monstrosity?
What ifs and prototypes are not really my thing, but the second I saw this box art on this newly released 35th scale TAKOM M28 A1 A2, which of course is a fictional tank based off the T28 prototype, it was love at first sight. Don't ask me why, because I'm not one to question love. I'm going to take you through the build and share some of the good things and some of the not so good things about this kit, and show you some of the areas that can be easily upgraded and take you through the complete build. So let's get started.
Find a seat, this could take a while.
There is no getting around the fact that this tank has 4 tracks at 100 links per side. Why did they do that? Well, the tank was so heavily armoured it weighed in at 95 tonne. By spreading the weight over that larger surface area of those 4 tracks, that allowed for reduced ground pressure so it could soften the terrain. As you can see, I began construction with the bogies and the suspension elements. TAKOM have, of course, made these parts workable, which is really nice. Actually, the engineering is really quite beautiful, but it definitely adds to the complexity of the assembly. I found by getting a bit of a production line together, this part of the process was oddly enjoyable, even though I had to make 16 sets. And to do the sums for you, that is 64 wheels inbound. Now, although the instructions suggest building the bogies and the tracks for the main body and those outside set of those separate tracks in 2 different stages, I figured I'd power through these repetitive tasks and just get them out of the way. The side walls and the floor section have been assembled here, and the protruding arms are installed to that wall as well. Now, these pegs will marry up with the opposing pegs on the outside sponsons, so it's really important that they are straight and as square as you can make them. That'll become a little clearer as I move through this build. Now, the wheels can be attached here, as well as a suspension system, allowing them to sit perfectly flush with the flat surface. Moving to the body and the inside track guards, well, they have numerous brackets over them and they all require a degree of cleaning. Now, I found the best way to do that was pinching them in between a pair of tweezers carefully so they didn't ping across the room, and just sanding away the burrs that were left from the sprue gates. And once applied, the track guards could be glued in place. The rear wall of the hull is a straightforward assembly, however it does require a tow cable to be woven around those brackets. Now, the kit comes with a length of brass wire, however there is a lot of spring in that wire. Annealing is a process of heating up the brass which will break the memory of that wire and allow me to bend it without it springing back on me. It's the same process you can use to soften your etch parts before bending them. I'm moving now to the cupola and carefully attaching those clear window parts. For the other periscopes, I leave them out of the model at this point, as I like to pre-paint them and attach them later. How I do this is paint them in an all over clear green, and then once dry, apply a couple of small pieces of masking tape to the clear parts of that periscope. And then once they're in place, a coat of aluminium, and then finally a coat of black, and you'll see later on in the process, once that mask is removed, how cool these things look. I could then fit that casemate to the hull. This was the point I got a sense of the scale of this thing. The framework for those engine covers comes as a 3-piece assembly and drops really nicely into the cavity. Now, the hooks that you see there need to align to hinge points on the covers, so I found the placement of those hinges to be a little bit clumsy. Just be mindful of their purpose and they should look okay. My focus now shifts to the tools and brackets located over the outermost guards that will house that second set of tracks. Interestingly, those outside sponsons were removable and could be towed behind the tank when it was in a transportation configuration, and the kit allows for you to actually build it in such a fashion. Decreasing the overall width of the tank meant it could be suitable for transport by rail, otherwise it would be too wide. I left a couple of the spare track links off the side there and only added the bracket, and to create the look of a damaged toolbox lid, the lid was carefully heated and then damaged with a pair of soft pliers and glued to that sponson. These outer sponsons also had a sliding toolbox that could be used by pulling them from the rear of the vehicle. It could be an interesting detail if you wanted to add that on your own model. Assembly now moves back to the rows of wheels for those sponsons, or those secondary tracks if you like. Now assembly is essentially the same as it was on the tank itself, only this piece fits on the opposing wall of the sponson. Now to address the elephant in the room and the reason why I think we may not see too many of these kits making it to the table, and that is the workable tracks that come with the kit. I shared my concerns in a previous video, but I'll give you a quick recap in case you missed it. Plus, I'm going to give you a chance to win yourself a set of aftermarket tracks for this one, so stay tuned. Now these tracks consist of tiny pieces that use a jig system to help assemble them. Now in fairness, the tracks are workable and do look pretty good, but after timing how long it took to produce 7 links only of the track, it took me over 17 minutes. Now with 4 lengths of track at 100 links per track, that is over 16 hours alone. And when you consider I just clipped the pieces off the sprue without really cleaning them up, I think you could comfortably double that timing estimate to do it properly. Now how many modelers do you think have the patience to put themselves through that? And that is where I connected with DN Studio and got my hands on their 3D printed tracks. Absolute game changer, and I will consider these a must-have if you're considering this kit. Now generally speaking, you would be going from around 25 hours to build the kit tracks to around 4 hours to build these 3D printed tracks. Check out the other video for further information. I'll leave some links down below. But here is where things get exciting, because I'd like to give you guys a chance to win a set of DN Studio T28 tracks for yourself. Just make sure you like this video and of course are subscribed, and make sure your comment down below has DN mentioned somewhere in there. I'll draw this on September 11, 2026, so make sure you get your entries in. In classic me style, I thought I'd shortcut the track assembly even with the quicker assembly on hand, because in reality you simply won't see it on the model. Unless of course you were posing it in that transportation mode. I tried gluing the track in with super glue with very little success for some reason, and a great deal of frustration. And then I had a light bulb moment of wiring them up to tension the track, so much easier to tension them this way. But in reality, I probably should have just built the entire length and be done with it. Now you get the choice of the A1 or the A2 version barrel of this fictional tank. You're given the option of using the 120mm T53 gun or the 155mm T7 gun. Interestingly, these guns were real experimental weapons developed for the T30 and the T34 heavy tank programs. So from a plausibility point of view, it actually makes a lot of sense. Now there are 2 mantlets in the box and they marry up with the barrel you choose, so be careful that you've chosen the right one. I found the instructions a little confusing if you're not careful. I felt the T7 was just too big and set about fitting the 120mm barrel. Now take care with that pivot mechanism also for the barrel, because there is a right way and a wrong way that needs to sit. Ask me how I know, just check the instructions, unlike me, and you'll be fine. Small improvements can be made to the headlights by first punching a small styrene circle with the punch and die set and gluing it in as a mounting point for that wire. Now a small hole can be drilled in the rear of that light assembly, then the piece of lead wire I have here gives me the look I'm after. I'd later go on to include wiring on the searchlight as well. The guards for the headlights and horn are supplied as photo etch parts, and again I anneal them using the flame, which allows them to soften right up and be easier to bend around the bending jigs that come with the kit. Now I fear these will be getting knocked off or bent on a regular basis, but I glued them on with super glue nonetheless. Now given how fragile these etch pieces are, I would suggest a 3D upgrade may be a really helpful addition for this assembly. Bringing it all together now, and I painted the insides of the tracks and wheels as a bit of an insurance policy, because once assembled there will be no accessing these sections. Any little glimpses should just present as a dark shadowed area this way. Those outside sets of track sponsons should then just cap over the sides, as there is a male and a female connection point using those fixing pins. This is where you will find out if those pegs that I mentioned earlier in the build don't align. It will offer resistance and you will have to carefully wiggle them around to find their connection points. Now if you're having issues and are planning on not showing this thing in that transportation mode, I'd consider just clipping them off and saving the hassle. I'm not gluing these parts together yet, so I can access the internal areas for painting once that begins. Now I'd been chipping away at some of the other sub-assemblies around the model, such as the searchlight, the oil drums for the stowage rack, as well as the stowage rack itself. Now, I found the instructions to be quite clumsy as to how it should look or sit on the model, but the light bulb moment was working out. The brackets on the underside of that rack need to cap over the back of the model, and it all made sense then. The searchlight was first painted in a brass, then washed with a black enamel paint and buffed with a gunmetal pigment before fitting that clear lens. Placement and the assembly was again super fragile, and just take care with the part. Placement and the assembly was again super fragile and a little bit unclear, so just take your time with this part of the build. I'd also sprayed the glass on the cupola in the green and created a custom mask set for those areas. I'll get a set together and upload it on my Patreon page for my killer kangaroos to download. One of the other sub-assemblies was the machine gun ring and that 50 cal. Now that assembly is tricky and time consuming, but it does look great. I won't be fitting this part until after the model has been base painted. The headlights are sprayed with an SMS Super Silver and the clear lenses could be glued in place. The T28 has a couple of cranes hanging off one side, and these were the cranes that allowed those outer tracks to be lifted off the main body of the tank when they were being placed into that transportation mode. The assembly for these again was really fiddly and quite awkward, however, with a little test fitting and some patience, they make sense. You get a piece of thread for the cable on these small cranes, which I mistakenly threw away thinking it was a thread off my t-shirt. Now I have other plans for this cable, but for now the cranes were glued in place, and as a note, placement either side would be okay to put these things. Building a model like this, I can't help but think it feels like something Adam Wilder would love to sink his teeth in. Adam's work is legendary, so I'm trying to channel my inner Adam Wilder here, and I can't help but wonder what Adam's approach would be to the cast texturing on a model like this.
Hey, wait! This isn't one of my vids. Anyway, apply the medium when texturing, keeping it refined only to the parts that need it. This will help break up parts, making the assembled model much more interesting for filming and photographing.
So with Adam's voice ringing in my mind, I reached for the Tamiya putty and the airbrush cleaner. Tamiya's airbrush cleaner is essentially the same as Tamiya Extra Thin, but a lot cheaper if you can get your hands on it. The cleaner thins the putty and allows me to be able to stipple the liquid over the areas of the tank that showed the heavy cast texture that you can see in reference. The moulding in the model was reasonable, however adding texturing will bring it to life and add extra dimension under that paint. Different sized brushes can be used to give a variation to the look, with the smaller brushes giving more control to that application. Keeping the application to the specific panels is important, so masking tape can be used to offer a degree of protection here, but a little care with the brush is generally good enough. To build on that effect, small pimples are added to that texturing in a refined way by mixing CA glue filler and black super glue, just mixing them up and using the tip of a toothpick. Looking at reference, you can clearly see this effect that I assumed was created from the casting process, but I've since been corrected, however, by a friend in the shipping business suggesting that this is pitting caused by moisture migrating under the paint and causing that steel to corrode. This would take time to present like this and probably not appropriate on a serving vehicle. So take this as a teachable moment, and I'll thank the maker on building a fictional tank so I can make up my own story. I was really happy with that effect, but I felt it just needed something else to that model. Maybe I could add some shell impacts.
It is more interesting to bunch up impacts in one place to give the impression that the enemy was aiming toward a specific area. Like a weak spot, for example.
Creating shell impacts isn't something I've ever done before, but I was so inspired with Adam's A39 Tortoise, I wanted to try and replicate the look of those shell impacts over this model. I began the process by marking a few locations with a pencil just to ensure I was happy with the placement. I can then use a micro drill to begin the process of creating the damage over the part. For square on impacts, the drill would be kept at around 90 degrees to the surface. However, I tried to think about what an angular impact might look like and modified the angle to suit. Now, I'm not drilling all the way through because this is an operational tank with extremely thick armour. However, if I was to drill all the way through it, it'd still be okay, as I can fix it with a little bit of that putty. To expand the holes that I was creating, I use a larger diameter drill bit, being mindful of the shell sizes that I was trying to replicate. Different sizes, depths, groupings and angles should all work together to help create a story over this model. I can then fill the hole with some Tamiya putty. And once that putty starts to set, which is generally pretty quickly, the handle of a paintbrush can be used to define the impact of that crater with the excess putty squeezing out of the hole. This creates the look of that molten metal left from the impact. Before that putty completely cures, the top of a blade is used to break up that smooth edge of that putty, creating a more realistic look to the detail. I used a VMS liquid latex mask to mask up those clear sections, and then the model was taken outside and primed with a Mr. Surfacer 1500 black straight from the rattle can. Now, given how far we've come today, I think this is a good place to take a bit of a breather. Like I mentioned earlier, I was taken by this kit the moment I saw the box art, and I knew this was going to be a model that would fast track its way to my modelling bench and jump ahead of the queue. In terms of a build, it was one I really enjoyed, but it was quite exhausting. Repetitive, complex assemblies require your attention and focus over long periods of time, and there is a degree of forward thinking required to piece this one together. That's not a complaint by any means. When you commit to a subject as big as this, with that number of wheels and tracks, there's always going to be a degree of discipline required to get through it. Getting that primer down though really did come as quite a relief, a real milestone moment with this model, and I can't wait to bring you the next stage of this build. Thank you so much to Adam Wilder for playing along with me and joining in here. Be sure to check out Adam's work on Facebook and YouTube. He's one of the true masters of this hobby and someone I look up to. I'll leave a link to his work down below. And thank you to my Patreons whose encouragement and support keep this channel moving. I love watching their modeling level up, and I love knowing that I'm able to help them achieve that. And lastly, don't forget to enter the draw for those DN Studio tracks. You really will not regret it. Remember guys, this is the greatest hobby in the world. Share it with your family and share it with your friends, and let's be proud of what we do. Until next time, I'll see you soon.
Hey, wait, this isn't one of my vids.